It was to reveal to them a God that loves them and that they themselves are willing to surrender to and to follow. And we need to remember that it's about the changing of the heart. The 10 Commandments aren't etchings in stone. But later on, God says, what was written in stone, I will write. In the book of Jeremiah, I want to write my law upon their hearts. Because our hearts are always busy fashioning other gods. Let me say that again. Our hearts are always busy fashioning other gods. Whether we think it's happening or not. John Calvin, one of the great theologians of the 16th century, said the human heart is a perpetual factory of idols. Now, we might not think up, okay, I'm going to do the jackal head today, I'm going to do the crocodile today, I'm going to do the falcon head today. But in our heart, we are constantly pursuing our own self and our self-interest. And just because we think we know God, that does not mean that our view and worship of God is separate and impenetrable to the ways of our heart. Rather, worshiping God, as he says in John 4:24, in spirit and in truth. These are the types of worshipers that the Lord is looking for. And this is a type of worship that brings God glory. Notice when he says, I want worshipers who will worship stone, wood, very distinctly. You can't see either of those two things. You can't see spirit and you can't see truth. You must believe in the truth and you must have faith in the spirit. But you can't see either of those. We can't craft it. Now, what are some of the ways that we attempt to worship God, the right God, in the wrong way? Well, the first point I want to make this morning is that we worship an image rather than listening to the Word. Think about it. The people of Israel, they've been waiting at the foot of the mountain for some time. Now, God spoke to them. God had a big ceremony, and then he took Moses up, and he gave him the commandments. So the people saw an image of God. I mean, they were pretty frightened by what they saw. So it's not like God didn't give them anything to see. But they saw some smoke, they heard a voice, and so they got their attention. But then Moses goes up for an extended period of time. And what do the people do? What does the heart do? The idol factory gets a pumping. And they get lonely, they get discouraged, and they tell Aaron, come on, give us a little something we can see so that we can worship this God or these gods that led us out of Egypt. And Aaron refuses at first, but then he submits, and his intention was just to try to help assuage the people, and he did try to give them something of the true God. Interesting, I thought that this is where Baal worship was introduced into the people of Israel, but this was not. Baal worship came later under the rule of Ahab and Jezebel. This was about them just wanting to craft something that they could see, because all they knew were gods that they could see. And what was God giving to them via Moses? 10 words. 10 words. 10 ways in which they could hear and know and understand God, but not a visual picture. Well, how have we let the Word of God fall by the wayside today? For centuries, if you study church history, for centuries, people were willing to give their lives hiding what they thought were the manuscripts of the true Word of God against rulers and leaders who were trying to wipe out the Christians and this Word of God. People would give their lives rather than give up the very words that God would have left with his people. I think the enemy got a little smart. Rather than trying to destroy the Word, I'll just give it to them in 38 different languages, 10 different copies, fill their shelves with it, make their lives busy, and see how often they actually pull the Word down and open it up and read it. We don't love the Word of God. We love God. We love what God has done. But it is very rare, and I'm including myself in this, that I meet someone who loves the Word of God, loves it. The Word of God has been the root system for the church for 2,000 years. And yet we, if we're honest with ourselves, we're no better than that congressman up there. Do we know our 10 commandments right now? Do we know the Word of God? We try to frame God. Well, give me a bracelet that says WWJD on it. That'll remind me to follow God. Or let me wear a cross around my neck because that'll remind me to follow God. Or we do all these things and we try to make all these images, even in our mind, of what God could and should be to help us with God, and we don't do the very thing that is most specific and effective in that, and that is read and know the Word of God. So I want to encourage you this morning. How are you loving and knowing the only way that God has given himself to be revealed? Jesus, when he's introduced to us in John chapter 1, Jesus is called Logos. And what does Logos mean? It means word. In the Greek, it means word, the revealed Word of God. Jesus himself is introduced to us via the prophet or the disciple John, the apostle John, as the Word. When we worship an image rather than listening to the Word of God. Second, we worship the right God in the wrong way when we turn God into something we can manipulate and control. Now, I've shared this before to some degree, but one of the most troublesome characteristics I developed in my youth was that of a manipulator. I was a conniver, manipulator. I wanted to get what I wanted to get. My poor mother. Although it's partly her fault for letting me get away with it, right? Okay. But at some point it became my fault. There was an age of accountability I grew into when I needed to know better. But I would wear this woman down. I would ask her to do something. Hey, Mom, can I go out till 3 in the morning, go with my buddy Phil, go fishing down on the St. Clair River, about 35, 40 miles away? His dad might be with us. What? Are you crazy? You're 15 years old. You want to go 40 miles away at 4 in the morning? No way. And I would wear her. Okay, well, how about if we try to work really hard to get Mr. Medley to come and to be with us, and finally, she would give in. I only remember twice in my entire life when I really wanted something and my mom held to her no. Terrible what I did to her. Now, I thought I was cool. When I could tell my friends what my parents would let me do, because I wouldn't disobey overtly. No, I'd think I was still obedient if I had just dishonored her, disrespected her, and worn her down to nothing. And then before I would leave, I'd do this really cheesy, I see that smile, and I'd make her smile about it. I'd play into my mom's love for me and make her smile at the fact that I had just done what I had done to her. It's horrible. You think about it. Because I didn't want my conscience to be seared. Well, I was pretty happy with this at the time. However, that sword cuts both ways. I grew up believing that I could manipulate authority in my life to get what I ultimately wanted. This, as I found out the hard way, was a lie. In the Marines, there were several occasions when I was told to do something. And you don't disobey orders in the Marines. And, well, he might have just meant it like this. And a couple times I got caught. And I could have been written up on charges for disobeying orders. He didn't. I had a couple, what they call little homemade disciplinary actions that I was able to do, so nothing went on the record. But it was the seed of manipulation. In dating relationships, when you're supposed to esteem and honor the other person, I would manipulate all of my relationships in my late teens and early 20s to get what I wanted. Is it any surprise that eventually I was broken up with by all 3 or 4 girlfriends or interests that I had? But most importantly, in my relationship with God over the years. This belief that I can manipulate to varying degrees God has created much trouble in my life, especially in my heart. It would have been so much better if I would have learned about a loving, trustworthy authority that had been taught to obey it the first time when I was young. and if I hadn't had to wait to learn that lesson until I was older. And this is an important point. This is my community service message right here, because so much of this idea that we can rebel, that we can do our own thing, that authority doesn't hold, my brothers and sisters, it begins in our homes. And it begins in the environment in which we are raising up our children. You're not just raising up your children, preparing them for life ahead. What you as mother and father are doing for them is you're giving them pictures and images of who God is and how God is supposed to be related to. And if you are unwilling to stand firm when you establish authority, if you're unwilling to give boundaries for your child and hold them to it, even as the consequences are hard on them and are hard on you, you deceive them and you dishonor them. My mom thought she was helping me. To this day, my mom still wants to love us. And she doesn't hold the line in instances when she should. And she's now in her mid-60s. I love my mom, but I see this now. I wish I would have seen it then. You and I reflect the very image of God to these children. And being their friend is not as important as it is for them to believe that there is an absolute authority in this world that they must submit to. Now, the trouble is we are either their friend and we give in, or when we become the authority, we become harsh and angry, and we create all this bitterness. There is a better way. And I would encourage some of you who are sensing that to seek that out, to create that environment in your home.